website and programs that we have in the optics program, one of which is this one, which is the Continuing Professional Development Workshop. And so we offer a series of workshops, some of which are in person, most of which are virtual, on a variety of topics that are of interest to particularly community college physics faculty members. And so that's what we're doing today. Today's topic is along the lines of involving your students in something other than just classes, and the variety of different things that you can do with your students. And we're very fortunate to have with us Brad Conrad, who is the director of the Society of Physics Students. That runs, many of you, when you went through graduate school or even undergraduate school, will probably had SPS chapters at your college and universities. And so Brad is the national director of that. And so the one question I have to ask, I think, Chris, you said we are recording this. And so if you have an objection to that, just please tell us, just send it, drop a line in the chat saying that you do not want to be recorded. With that, Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about student groups to your colleges. I have like sort of a potpourri of things to kind of go over with you. One of the things is I really wanted to try to be like very pertinent, very things that you could use tomorrow if you wanted to. So I will provide some background information, sort of set, like we all like data because we're scientists, right? So like I'll set the playing field with some data, but I'm going to end up with a bunch of case studies about 2-year colleges that have their own vibrant student groups. So I'll go over what they are, how you would start one, best practices for things, and then we'll sort of end up and talking about the practice of it. So if at any point you want me to stop and say more, please interrupt me, because I tend to talk fast and I'm gonna try to slow down, but just feel free to interrupt me, put a question in the chat. I'll try to look at the chat, but just interrupt me. Okay, I'm gonna go and get started. Share screen. Do you all see a slide deck?
Yes.
Okay, and I can see you right here, so we're good. Okay, cool. So I am the director of the Society of Physics Students, which is a group that is open. So it's sort of the collection of all clubs that support physics and astronomy departments, not just across the US, but internationally as well. We have currently 851 chapters for SPS. About 45 of them are international, going all the way to Iran, China, the Philippines, all over kind of places. And then linked but distinct to SPS is Sigma Pi Sigma, which is the Physics and Astronomy Honor Society. So they're connected. They are two separate organizations. They share a constitution and bylaws. But what I'll be talking about today is largely focused on the Society of Physics Students, which is to support all students which have an interest in physics and astronomy, and that includes faculty. And so the whole concept of student groups, or the whole concept of SPS, is that it sort of can help out in a bunch of ways that are kind of surprising if you haven't taken a step back and sort of thought about how it all works together. But vibrant undergraduate student groups really can help. So the pipeline for undergraduate students, that includes the department health, department culture, retention, and recruitment. It also provides a lot of things which may be difficult or a little bit more challenging to sort of get done during the classroom time, such as professional development, leadership opportunities, and building that sense of community, which sort of helps round out the student experience, because the students are not going to class just for the classes, but they're going to be immersed in what it means to be a physicist, astronomer, engineer, whatever their future career is. And it also provides these connections, these really strong touch points for them. I don't know if you ever really thought about it. For a lot of these students, you may be the first physicist they ever meet. You are their first colleague. You're their first connection to anything beyond the concept of what it means to be a physicist or an astronomer or an engineer. And so the student clubs can do a lot of different things, and I'll sort of go over all of that. I will point out that I have a lot of like student art and student pictures in my presentation, and this was our original student logo back in 1968, which I think it's awesome because it's like things that you probably use in like your first class in a physics sequence. So I actually wanted to ask you all. So I always like to start this off because me talking at you is not really that exciting. And this is sort of a weird question, but for anybody that might be able to help me out, There's lots of things that happen when students enroll in a two-year physics two-year physics program or an astronomy program or engineering program. So would some people mind contributing? What are some core components? Like, what are some things that happen with those students, around those students, for those students? Anything.
Classes.
Okay. So they take classes. They take physics or astronomy classes. That's a good one. That's one. Give me some other ones.
Sometimes they attend conferences.
Yep. So they're doing conferences either to be like part of a community or to present. Maybe it's an oral presentation or a poster presentation. Great one. What else we got?
Sometimes they're involved in outreach activities in the community.
Yep. So they're definitely many student groups choose to like do things that are not just like for themselves, but for others, and for others at the university, others at the college, others at maybe high schools, elementary schools, things like that. Could I get one more?
Study groups?
Yes. So they're interacting outside of the classroom to work on coursework, to work on maybe research experiences, laboratories, to help other students, these kinds of things. Thank you all. And so when I take a look, so before I get to my big laundry list of like all the things that we have to try to do, so you said some really great things, but if I were to say there was a really successful two-year college and they had lots of physics, like people that were studying physics and astronomy and engineering, what's one or two things that would make them stand out as being super successful?
A sense of community.
Okay. So so they're just not coming in, taking the class and leaving. They're doing other things at the department.
Right.
Transfer to university and continue in their major.
Yep. So they have goals and they're achieving their goals, whether it's a four-year institution or whether it's getting a great job or whatever it is they want to do. Great. Give me one more.
Involved with internships?
Internships, REUs, certificates. Anybody else? Okay. But I think you all hit the nail on the head, right? So there's lots of things that they come and they sign up to do. But when we think about successful programs and programs we want to emulate or surpass, we highlight some different things, which is interesting. And so when often we think about what happens, there's definitely the curriculum, right? Whether it's physics, astronomy, engineering, manufacturing, whatever it is, and whether their goal is just the associate's degree or just a couple of classes, or they want to go on and get that advanced degree. Often the students, and today ever more so, they want to do interdisciplinary endeavors. So they may be taking your physics classes, but they really want to be an electrical engineer. Or maybe they're taking physics because they're getting ready to be a medical physicist. There's lots of ways that physics is impacting other disciplines. So beyond just the curriculum, somebody said community. And when the students join, this really is their first social network that's around academia, around a subject topic. So it really is sort of their core or prototype social experience. It's their first network for physicists and astronomers. And more than that, while they're getting friends, while they're taking classes and interacting with people, the people that they're meeting are really their first professional network. So they're making LinkedIn contacts, and those people are going to be lifelong contacts. And I think Tom mentioned that they go and give research posters and talks, which is great, but also they're ambassadors for what science and physics and astronomy is, right? So when they're talking to their friends and their families and their colleagues, they're trying to talk to a lot of people about why science should be funded. Why should people go back to school and learn about all of the awesome things that a two-year college university can teach them? And additionally, we're teaching them how to write, and we're teaching them how to exist in sort of a digital way, a digital format. And then there's all the things that sort of happen that often people mention when they're talking about a successful program, right? They're building fellowship and congeniality. So are we having a diverse group? Are we having an inclusive atmosphere for the people that want to learn physics and astronomy? And then there's all the professional development, including leadership and self-advocacy. And then there's all of the things like outreach, research, networking, and most importantly, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but that sense of identity. Because we can have people come in and take our classes, but if they don't feel like they're a scientist, if they don't feel like they're a physicist, then they're much less likely to stay on and to finish that 2-year degree, much less likely to go on to a 4-year degree. So that sense of identity is, I think, the one thing that student clubs can help with possibly the most. And so just a little bit of resource. I'm going to pepper in some resources as we kind of go out. Now, this is, it's about 20 years old now, but I think it's one of the best places to go if you're sort of beginning to think about this topic. There was a great report called the Strategic Programs for Innovations in Undergraduate Physics. And I love physics because it is full of acronyms. Everything's an acronym. So this is Spin Up, and it's called the Spin Up Report. It was one of the first, it was a recent report that came out, and it did site visits for 21 different schools, successful schools, and it looked at all the common characteristics that those departments had that were that they were doing and using to support students. And it goes over things like leadership, supportive environment, experimentation, evaluation, lots of different size institutions. Many of them had 1 or 2 faculty, many had 3 or 4. But the key takeaway was, when you go and you look at that report, is most of the things that report is recommending can be done with undergraduate student groups. So you don't even have to change your courses. It's just sort of the infrastructure and the environment around the courses that we're really talking about. So if you haven't had a chance to read it out, here's a QR code to the link, takes you to the APT website. It's a great resource. And so just so we're all on the same page, it's not all people have an undergraduate student club when they're coming through their education, because they might be coming from a different educational system. But I think the one thing that most people realize is that these clubs provide a sense of community. And this is a picture from an event we did in 2019, and a student, they had to say, what was the one thing that makes your student group special? And they just wanted to say the word community. And helping when you have a group of students, giving them ownership and having them have a sense of control, and having them create a local environment where they can control what happens. And it's a mechanism for them to interface with the department, with programming, and for them to do whatever it is they want to do. That ownership is really vital and essential. And it can help with professional development and department feedback. So you're teaching the skills that are most necessary, and also with career outcomes, which I'll get to in a little bit. And so if you're not familiar with undergraduate student groups, I chose literally randomly. We collect photos from all the student clubs across the globe every year. And these are just literally a random selection of photos. But my hope is that some of these speak to you in either things that you've experienced yourself or things that you would like your students to do, because all of the people featured here are undergraduate students doing things through a club. You can see, like, they're making grilled cheese here and salad, apparently. They're doing an open house, obviously in a parking lot, which I think is awesome. Here's a talk that's being given within, this is actually at a 2-year institution. They're doing liquid nitrogen ice cream. They're doing outreach with local high school students. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about. By the way, in the bottom left, they are building a rocket. So if you want to know about how to build rockets, I can set you up with a contact that she's done at Henderson State University, and they do an awesome program down there. The other thing that I wanted to show you is I get to visit lots of different schools, and this was a school, and it turns out that when a student graduates, because the building's so old and facilities didn't really care, each graduating student was allowed to paint a block. So you can see here, the whole room sort of covered in all these painted blocks, but I think this is awesome. And it sort of helps to make the room that the students are working in and studying in feel like they own the space. So I just kind of want to show this as an example of, like, this is the kind of thing that I think we're aiming for. Like, when students feel empowered to do things like this and they don't get in trouble. So the other thing that's important is to kind of look at what's the aggregate, what's going on at undergraduate clubs. So this is with 2-year and with 4-year institutions. What do students want to do? And so this is a survey of over 450 different clubs. It's averaged over 2 years and deduped. And 77% of all undergraduate clubs do outreach, meaning they're reaching out to their local high schools, elementary schools, or doing community outreach on campus. So they're doing things to show people how much they love physics and astronomy and engineering. They're also excited about going to conferences. They want to fundraise. They want to learn about careers. They want to apply for awards and scholarships. They want to connect to other schools, just not their school, but maybe a local 4-year institution or another 2-year institution. They want to have guest speakers, and they want to have people get really excited about physics and astronomy. Also, surprisingly, a lot of them seek out and are asking for leadership advice because this is their first time being a leader. They don't necessarily know what it means to be a leader. Yeah, like, okay, we have physics club. What do we do with physics club? So they need some guidance there. They also are seeking connections to membership societies like AAPT, and they want ideas for things to do because this is their first time ever doing it. So this is where we come in and we can really help them as potential advisors and people that are willing to support clubs. And so I do like to show data about the group that I'm talking to. And so I did pull some data from about typical two-year college, just to understand like the scope of what's going on. And typically two-year colleges have a smaller number of full-time staff than four-year institutions. The most recent data I was able to find is that 73% of all two-year colleges have one or two full-time faculty. So it really is sort of like one or two people doing the entire effort, right? And what's interesting though is that if you look at what these faculty do, they do an awful lot. So if you're a part of the group that has one or two full-time faculty, then you're typically not just teaching physics, but you're teaching other things beyond physics. So just by show of hands for those that feel like sharing, is anybody part of a two-year college where you're part of one or two total faculty? One, two, couple people, three. And so you're typically having to teach things that are just not physics, which sort of changes what a student group might look like. And then what's also interesting is that if you're part of a two-year college institution that has more than two faculty, 85% of that group only teach physics. So it really is sort of a different ecosystem, whether you're talking about institutions that have one or two or more than two. And the kind of the point of this data, at least the point for me is that for a lot of the people on the call, there's finite resources, right? We have more stuff to do now than we did 4 years ago, than more than 8 years ago. And it's really important that we're focused and clear about responsibilities about clubs and what it is we're trying to do, and maybe even setting expectations. A lot of people have heard the expression trying to boil the ocean. That is not what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to add things to the department that aren't unsustainable. And so I did want to talk a little bit about you all. So comparing, for those of you that were teaching in 2019, just say pre-COVID versus now, I was curious, how have things changed for you all in terms of like workload and the department and the students that you're seeing coming through? Would anybody feel comfortable sharing a little bit about how things might be different now than 4 years ago? I can share. One of the things that I've noticed is that I'm way busier. I don't know how it happened, but whenever COVID happened, things changed, and then the world came back to normal. But that I had my new things and my old things, so I feel like I'm way busier now than I did back in 2019. Would anybody else care to share?
Well, I retired a little over a year and a half ago, so I think that's a big change. But coming out of the pandemic, I realized that I kind of like teaching virtually. I think for certain students, it had a certain appeal, and for certain other students, it had absolutely no appeal at all. But the pandemic made that delineation very, very, very visible to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely change in teaching, and some people flourish in a virtual environment, some flourish in a digital environment. Anybody else care to share about how things might be this? If it's exactly the same, I'd be interested to hear that too.
For me, it changed that I still prefer to teach in person, and my classes are in person, but I do ask that the students submit their homework electronically,
Mm-hmm.
and I grade electronic submissions rather than paper copies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more able to, I got more better versed with technology. I'm using more technology even in the classroom.
Yeah, for me, I had to switch totally how what I asked for because I used to ask for certain things written and I would grade the papers, right? And then when it switched to digital, I had to shift what I was asking and how I was asking it because it just took too much time the old way I was doing it.
It changed the way I did assessment. In my calc-based physics course, we went to all oral assessments. via Zoom, and that required a digital workflow.
Mhm.
And that really changed the students' worlds, I think, in a positive way, because after they transferred, they would report back to me and say, wow, that's just like they do it at the large universities.
Did anybody notice any shifts in the kinds of students that were coming into like intro physics?
Yes. I feel like the students that are coming now are less prepared.
Okay. So there's a difference in what they've been or how they've been prepared in the past.
Yes, and different expectations on their end. I think that COVID kind of made them think of all these different resources that they had available to them. And some use them in a way that they should be using those resources, but others do not. And I think all that kind of factored in. And now I see even bigger difference among the students in the classroom. Those that are motivated, want to learn, they're really doing better. But those that were not, I wouldn't say that didn't want to listen to instructions, maybe they didn't know how to listen to instructions. So they kind of fell behind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? So I guess kind of the point of what I was trying to get at is I think things today are very different than they were 4 years ago. We have ChatGPT now. Students, they missed out on, I'll say missed out, but they had a very different 1 or 2 year period compared to previous generations of students. And that had real impacts on how we teach. And more importantly, at least for this talk, about how they want to interact and how they do interact with faculty and with other students and how they form a community. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. And it also connects to some data that we're seeing. So what I'm showing you is this is not a perfect metric, but it's a metric that I have handy. So what I'm showing you on the y-axis is the number of people that are graduating with bachelor's degrees in physics. And then you're seeing the class of, and you can see ever since about 1998 or so, there's this long monotonic increase in the number of physics students. And then right around when COVID started, we started to see a decrease. And so we've seen the first decrease we've seen in 20 years. And the trend is going to continue for some data I'm going to show you in a second. What's interesting, though, is that the number of astronomy students is actually risen substantially and is still rising. So even though the number of physics students is dropping, astronomy is still rising. And so one of my goals when I see this graph is that if it makes me a little worried because there's now less physics students. And so I want to do anything I can to make sure that I'm improving recruitment and retention efforts. And I think student groups can really help with that. And so what I'm showing you now is aggregate data based on birth rates. So there's this really interesting article which came out, is sort of ahead of the curve a little bit it's called The Looming Educational Cliff. It came out in 2016. And based on birth rates, you can guess at what's going to happen in the future based on the current steady state. And so based on just the birth rates of people, we know that the number of people graduating from high school every year is going to say roughly flat from, let's say, 2010 or so through about 2016 or so. And then the number is going to very rapidly decrease by about 10 to 15%. And this is based exclusively on the number of people who are turning age 18. So this is a fact, and this is sort of the financial or the educational cliff. You might have heard other people talk about this in other talks, but it's a really big deal because the number of people going to college and two-year institutions is going to decrease very rapidly after about 2015, 2016. And you can actually, assuming steady state from the time of this report, you can sort of guess at who's going to be impacted the most. It turns out that the elite schools, sort of the top 50 in the nation, they actually see a steady. They're going to keep getting this number of students that they want to. They won't see any educational blip. You could even then go to like sort of the next 50 or so, like nationally recognized great programs. They'll see a little bit of a decrease because there's so many less students coming through the pipeline around 2030. And then where we expect to see the biggest impact are places that are not in the top 100 nation or ranked in the country. And that includes almost all 4-year and 2-year institutions. And we're expecting a big decrease in the number of students coming through coming through the system. And we can even pull out the 2-year data. So this is there's a bunch of assumptions that go into this, but the report, which is sort of listed below, How to Survive the Enrollment Bust, January 2021, sort of starts from the 2018 data point, and assuming people don't move, sort of assuming a bunch of things, you can look at how populations in sort of the Northeast, the South, the West, and the Midwest are going to fluctuate with this population bump. And in general, if you're in the South, you should expect about the same number of students. And if you're anywhere else, there's going to be about 5 to 10% less students kind of going through the system and possibly entering into two-year colleges and 4-year universities. So there's a big decrease coming, and that's something to keep in mind as we're sort of thinking about the future and how we can future-proof. There's another way of looking at the same data. It can be broken down by geographic region, so you kind of pick out where you're at. But it's not all doom and gloom. If you're in certain areas, you're actually going to see more students in 2030 than you did in 2020. So if you're in California, Texas, Minnesota, Arizona, or Utah, you're going to see an increase probably. But if you're anywhere else, it's going to be a decrease in the number of students. And what's interesting, and I'm going to get into next, is it's just not the number of students, but the educational background of students is going to be shifting. So certain institutions they want to pull from a certain geographic region or certain type of student. There's going to be increased competition among different kinds of institutions. And so you may get the same number of students you have in the past, but they might come from a more diverse or have a different background. And so a really good example of this we saw right after the pandemic. So what you're looking at it's the high school graduation enrollments. So the bar graph on the left are students that graduated high school. In the light blue, it is the fall of 2019. The dark blue is the fall of 2020. So pre-COVID, middle of COVID. And what you're looking at is the students that got enrolled into 2-year and 4-year institutions. So it's a direct comparison because it's students that definitely went to college, and how do they look different? And so what we're seeing is that, first of all, 2-year colleges saw a 10% enrollment decrease in the first year in aggregate, and 21% overall. It turns out that's actually gotten worse since this report came out. It's now 40% drop. So the number of people enrolling in 2-year colleges is down 40% from where it was 10 years ago. Additionally, changes, what you can see is that the groups that are most impacted are those coming from low income, or have a minority status, or low socioeconomic background. So basically what COVID did is it made it so that if you were coming from a low socioeconomic background, you are much less likely to go to a 2-year or 4-year institution statistically on average. So my takeaway is that COVID made it so that we were seeing fewer students, and we're also seeing students from very different backgrounds. Additionally, if you go into some of these other resources and some of these other articles below, what you also see is that the number of returning students, so students that have graduated high school or gotten their GED, worked for a while, and then come back, actually increased substantially. So we're seeing different students coming into our classrooms. Another data point that's happened since COVID, and there's follow-up data from the American Institute of Physics on this, is that faculty and students have had a different level of engagement post-COVID than pre-COVID. And the punchline is that people are burned out. Faculty and staff are having to do more with less resources, and faculty are burned out and students are burned out. So there's a whole report on this. I can send you a link. I forgot to put the QR code on here, but if you message me, I can send you the link. But the short version is faculty are burned out, and this is recent data. Additionally, we know from students that students are also burned out. So every couple of years, I do an event called the Physics and Astronomy Congress. It's about 1,000 undergrad students from all over the country. About 10% are from 2-year college and universities, by the way, I checked. And so when we ask them, what are your top 2 concerns? The right-hand side is what they said for 2019. The left-hand side is what they said in 2022. So pre-COVID, post-COVID. It turns out that the top concerns of students are imposter syndrome and mental health, for both years. But except in 2022, burnout. So burnout, over 40% of students are saying that they're burned out. They just have too many things going on. So the reason I'm talking about this is this really impacts what we try to do with student clubs, right? So throwing the kitchen sink at them is probably not a good idea, and doing things that support their sense of mental well-being and mental health and their sense of community, and getting them to feel included, like they're to help them feel like they are involved and part of the community, to sort of address imposter syndrome. Those are probably two really good things for us to focus on. But at the same time, faculty are burned out. We're really tired. So we have to make sure that we're trying to do things strategically and not try to boil the ocean. And so I just want to show a little bit of data, because it's important to kind of realize where students go. So this is data for four-year students, but upon graduation, what we're looking at is the percent of these students as a function of the year that they graduate. About half of them go get a job. So about half of physics and astronomy students go get a job, and then the other half go to grad school. But they all don't go to grad school in physics. A lot of them go to grad school in engineering, in medical physics, in law, in mathematics, chemistry, lots of different places. So the punchline is that physics students there are a lot of skills that we can teach them through student clubs, but about half of them are getting a job and half are going to grad school. And so when we say that they go get a job, just so we're all on the same playing field, a little bit less than 2/3 go into the private sector, but a lot of these students can go get jobs at national labs or the military or teach high school. And some do stay at colleges and universities, but this is a very transient population. A lot of them go over to the private sector or to teaching afterwards. And then if we drill into what the private sector is, so where do current students go when they go get a job right out of undergraduate degree? It turns out that when I was a student, I thought it was all engineering, and that's the most likely outcome, but it's way less than half. It turns out it's engineering, it's computer stuff, and it's also other STEM degrees. So our physics majors, when they go get a job, they go to lots of different places. So teaching a diverse set of skills is really important. And when we ask these students what skills they value the most 1 year after they've had a job, it turns out that working on a team and solving technical problems are the most popular, or the most responsive answers, whether they're in an engineering field or a computer science field. And what blows my mind is that if there's a physics student that goes and works in a computer science job, it turns out that it's more important they know how to work on a team than they know how to code. So it's these skills which end up making our students highly employable. So when you're going and you're thinking about your curriculum, yes, programming is super important, but also getting them to work in a group and having a student club where they get to work together, that's also really important. And I would debate probably just as important based on this. And so I'm gonna shift focus a little bit to really super focusing on student clubs and making it really pragmatic. But my one piece of advice that I wanted to share is that there's no such thing as a good hands-off advisor, right? So a lot of student groups, when they're going gangbusters and they're doing great, they're often doing stuff. You still need to be involved and sort of nudging them in the right direction, showing them things that they don't know. And they're going to be very proactive and do a lot of things, but you still need to be active. And at two-year colleges, one of the most important things is that in a four-year institution, that's sort of like a TAU of like 3 years, right? Like sort of they come freshman year and they're around for a couple of years, they get to see things evolve and they get to improve on things. But at two-year institutions, it's a shorter period of time. So the advisor, the club advisor, is the institutional memory. So it's really important that you sort of build that into everything that you're doing, because you have to constantly be reintroducing yourself and what the club is and what the goals are and what it is you're trying to do. So my advice to you is that if you're interested in starting a club, the number one best thing you can do is to do things that are tradition. Because if you tell students, hey, we have a tradition of doing a fall picnic, they think they've done it for 50 years, right? Because it's that sense of tradition, and they feel this sense of ownership because it's tradition. And traditions can be started at any time. So if you're looking for a couple of sort of throughout the talk, I'll mention traditions, but like a fall picnic to welcome everybody, that is a great tradition, right? It's really fun, kicks things off. You could have like physics, you do club shirts. That way they're sort of self-identifying around campus. That's another good one. You can have a multi-year research project. That is That is a tradition that has worked at two-year colleges before. I'll talk about that sort of at the end of the talk. Some people build trebuchets and they do pumpkin chucking, sort of like that's their thing, and it's in the fall, so it's a nice time of year. You could have sort of long-standing outreach events with like a local high school or elementary school. Like we always go to West End Elementary and we always do an optics show. Like these kinds of things really get students excited. Another one that has worked at a two-year college is an annual trip. There's a two-year college in New York that goes to the nuclear power plant. And that's what they do. And they do it every January. And they have like t-shirts with the nuclear power plant on it. Like they are all in on this trip. Like, I don't want to say too much, but a lot. They're really into the nuclear power plant. And then astronomy nights, if you have access to an observatory or some telescopes, just simply like going outside and having a star party, like that's really exciting. So the key is tradition, in my opinion. And so the key is that the groups that you're looking to form, they do a bunch of things. They're a support network for the students. They provide academic support through whether it's through study sessions or through tutoring other students. But it really is this sort of all-encompassing environment for them. And it's just not one thing that it's going to do. But my advice to you as a as a faculty member to two-year institution is it's really good if you focus in on one or two things that the club does, so it doesn't take up all the oxygen and make it too much for you or for them. And it really is sort of a prototype for students and a micro environment for what their future identity and professional sense of community is going to look like. So if you want to start a club, this is what I would do. The first thing is you need to find a student that wants to partner with you and work with you on this. Because if it's just you, it's not going to work. I promise. I've seen it happen. Like you can do anything you want and you can get the food and they'll eat the food and they'll leave. You have to have a student leader, somebody that's willing to work with you in starting a club. My next piece of advice is it's really important that you meet with the student leader, just meet with them biweekly. It doesn't have to be long. It could be 15 minutes, but just touching base with them gives them a sense of that they're leaders and they need to be doing things. And it helps to actualize the things. It helps them to do a lot of the work that it takes work off your plate. So biweekly meetings with the officers. I then also suggest you need to have a cadence. And this is one of the key things with starting a group is you need to have a rhythm. And it has to be super predictable, like months in advance, because students don't read their email. I don't know if you've noticed that yet. That was a joke. We don't read our emails. But you need to tell them it has to be like 4 words, right? Like we meet Thursday afternoon. Like it's got to be super simple. So I suggest biweekly. I'll show you some data for how often groups meet, but biweekly seems to be kind of a good meeting. So week A, you meet with the officers. Week B, they meet. Week C or week A, you meet with officers. Week B, they meet. Rinse and repeat. I suggest that you need to start with some activities. I suggest you have the student officers pick 1 or 2 things to host for for whoever wants to come. It could be a game night. It could be video games. It could be inviting a speaker to come talk, whatever it is. Pick 1 or 2 for the semester or the quarter. And then you ask the student club, they pick a couple. So you're picking a couple and they're picking a couple. And that really fills out the calendar pretty rapidly. And often things that faculty might suggest is, oh, I'm going to have a friend from a local institution come give a talk. Or, oh, we're going to go out to this high school and do an outreach day. Like these are the kinds of things that I would start off with if I were you. And then you have to encourage the club. You have to encourage them to participate. It doesn't take a lot. But some common things that work at two-year institutions that are successful are A is food. So if any way of getting them pizza, donuts, even a coffee machine, like just a coffee machine in like a corner like that can be magic, right? But giving them some sense of food is really helpful. The second is, and this is hard at some institutions, but if there's a place that the students can congregate and work on homework when the room is not in use, that does wonders. So some of you may be familiar with like an SPS lounge or an undergraduate lounge, that works. But if there's like an office or a classroom that's sort of like blocked off from like 3 to 6, like in the afternoon or something like that, that gives the students a place where they can kind of all call home base and they can work together. That's really important. The next is if you're able to encourage tutoring or mentoring, a model that I've seen work out in California is the department's able to get a little bit of money and they pay the physics students. They usually have like 2 or 3 sort of at any given time to be mentors and to tutor anybody in the classes. What that really means is the students are paid to sort of sit in a room from like 6 to 8, like Wednesday, Thursday, or like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then ends up being like a communal sense, and like lots of people hang out there and they really have a great time. So encouraging it by tutoring and mentoring, identifying a place to go or a big trip can be really exciting for students. And then the most important one is your time. So if you're able to meet with the students regularly, that gives them like a huge sense of like, oh, I'm a colleague. I'm doing this really important thing for the department. That's really key. So your long-term goal, if you're starting a club, is this sort of sense of belonging. You want students to not just feel that they're taking classes, but they are a part of your department. And you want them 2, 3, 4 years down the line after they've graduated with their associate's degree to come back to you, be like, hey, look, I'm in grad school, or hey, I have this awesome job. I want to talk about it with your students. Like, you want to build that, right? And the way I usually suggest you build it is sort of the trifecta of responsibilities, roles, and rewards. So it turns out that if you want to build belonging, you have to do all 3 of those. You have to give them a role within the department. You have to let them be responsible for things. And that means there is some probability that they'll fail at it, and that's okay. And then you have to give them rewards. So one way to help them sort of build their sense of identity is maybe you help them do a fundraiser for t-shirts, or you give them their own space, or you let them plan their own events, right? So help them determine what it is that you do. Another good one to sort of to loop in the concept of like role or responsibility and reward. So the department would usually have a spring picnic where I went to undergraduate. And the deal was the undergraduate SPS club, right? We had to cook the food for the cookout. We had to find somebody with a grill, make sure there was a grill, and then they would give us $200, which was a ton of money back then. They'd give us $200 for us to go buy the food, and then we would then cook the food, and then the faculty and their students would bring the sides, right? So there was always a probability that that would fail, and that was okay, because that's the whole deal, is you want to make them responsible for something so they want to do it, right? So my suggestion is to let them be in charge of a cookout, or let them take the like if you a guest speaker, and let the students take the guest speaker out for lunch, right? Or give them a piece of like do an award ceremony in the spring, and give them a piece of the award ceremony where they get to give out their own student awards to faculty and other students. Something that's sort of important that they feel is integral to what the department is doing. And then the third is sort of a role within the department. This can look very different, but if you have open houses, I suggest you let the students run the open house. Let them have the table, let them design it, because they're your best advocates for getting new students in, right? Or make it so that there's a student representative that comes to faculty meetings, or if it's just one of you, make a faculty meeting and it's you and the student and it's every month, right? There's lots of ways of having them feel like they're responsible for things, they have a role within the department, and they're getting rewarded for doing things for the department. And then just a couple of pro tips. I've said some of these already, but I would suggest you let them host the open house tables. You could do a cookout at the beginning of the semester. I suggest meeting with the chair or with the faculty, with the chair at least like twice a semester, specifically if you're hearing any concerns or hear about how the students are experiencing things, because their feedback can be really vital into sort of building that inclusive environment that you want. Supporting a study hall, have the club go visit the intro classes every year and say, you are welcome to come to game night. We do game night every second Thursday or something like that. Have them be the ones that are advocating for the club. And then additionally, I suggest if there's like a bulletin board or somewhere that you can devote to the student club, let them design the student board. Have them show all the things that they do. And one of the coolest things is, this is a 2-year college in Florida. What they do is they take a group photo every semester, because sometimes students come in and out, and they have the last 20 semesters photos on the wall, right? And so you can look up to see who's come and who's there, and you can even see like old friends and new, like, it's just, you wouldn't think it's a big deal, but it's one of those popular places in their section of the building, because people are always trying to look to see if they know people. So publicly display club activities. So I wanted to hear from you all. I've talked a good bit about like what are some things that you can do and how you might start. I'd like to hear what are some challenges that you might be facing And then we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And then after that, I'll go over some case studies of what specific, I think I have 5 different 2-year colleges, what they've done to make student groups. So I guess my question for you all, and then I'll stop sharing screen, is what challenges are keeping you from starting a student group if you wanted to? So I'll share what I heard from one advisor is one advisor said, I would love to have a student club, but they only have one student and they would be the entire club. And my response to them was, I think that's great because at least there is a club, right? And more importantly, when there's one student there, that might help attract other students. And more importantly, it doesn't matter how many students we're helping. What matters is the student that is in that club is able to express themselves and they have control. And it's a department, right? Because it's faculty and students. And part of the equation is to make sure students have a say in what's going on. So I think a student club with 1 member, that's totally good. My club had 3 members. So like, it's perfectly fine. I see some things in the chat. Anybody have any things that would impede them or they're worried about from starting a student club?
I think having students atrophy. So
Yep.
they get all excited at the beginning and then they just sort of drop off, and it's hard to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. That's true with all undergraduate student groups, and that's specifically hard. I don't want to say it's harder, but it's just as hard at 2-year institutions. And I think that's where you step in and setting reasonable goals, right? Like, okay, we are doing one thing a month. We're going to meet every other week. We'll do a talk. So somebody will do like 1 minute physics and we'll have pizza and we'll just chit chat and then we'll do one thing a month. That's a great way. But I think putting the brakes on a little bit can be really helpful. The other thing that is helpful is giving sort of, if you were to graph how active students are as a function of the year, it goes up, it goes here, and then it goes up till about November. And then I think it's a monotonic decrease with maybe a slight bump in January, right? But anything after March is not going to happen. That's my advice, unless it's about awards or graduation. So I would suggest, to sort of help with the atrophy, if you put the coolest thing in January, that really helps, right? Like for the kids that I mentioned in New York, it's the nuclear power plant. For a group in Virginia, it's going to the APS March meeting. They go in March, they prepare all year, they love it. For another group, they're really involved in research projects at a 2-year institution, and they send 2 representatives to the APS March meeting, and then they send 2 representatives to the state competition for research, and that's what they work on. And I think the latter one's in April. So atrophy is a big one.
I can see student employment being an issue because a lot of my students worked multiple jobs and came to class, I'm not going to say as an afterthought, but they shoehorned it into their schedule already.
No, I totally get it. And that can be very true, especially if you have a wide variety of students. Let's say you might have some like people just out of high school, and you might have somebody where they're 30 and they have a job and a family, right? And somehow the club's got to support both of those. I was at a 2-year college in Las Vegas, and the way that they did that is they orchestrate it so their classes were like in the afternoon, evening. Almost all of the classes for them were, and anytime they had an event, it was either right before class or typically right after class. Now, some people can't stick around, but you obviously can't serve everybody or make everybody happy, but just trying to move it around and putting it times when it was most convenient for people would be really helpful. So an example, like they had a really awesome guest speaker come in, and the class let out at 6:30. So it was like pizza and guest talk from 6:30 till 7:15. So it wasn't like that long a thing, but it still had a big impact. And there were 9 students that were at that institution, and all 9 students were able to come. Now, it was only for 45 minutes, but that's still a really big deal, right? So just making sure you're aware of the students you're trying to serve. And so like if you have a student leader that's like 18 and right out of high school and they want to plan all this stuff in the middle of the day, helping them to realize that's probably not going to work is also helpful. And then Tom said, my biggest problem was to find a student who was interested in running the club. Yes. So that's a problem I have also faced. You don't have any sticks, but you have carrots, right? So if you do have some carrots, that can be helpful. Like, so again, if you wanted to like, hey, like a guest speaker, that could be something that students get really excited about, or some kind of an event. The other thing that has worked is there were some physics students, and this is a little nerdy, but they were super involved in anime club. Like, so they were just super involved in anime the one year, right? And so, and they weren't super excited about doing stuff. And I'm like, well, why don't we do the physics of anime? And they like took off with this. They ran with it. Like I'm pretty sure we could have published the paper on the work that they did that year just on the physics of anime. Like I could be a millionaire and I didn't do it. But finding whatever they're already into and connecting it to that could help. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on. Yeah, so my other thing is talking directly to you as potential advisors is like, we want to do all this great stuff, but we have to make sure it fits in with our everyday tasks and the unforeseen tasks and the seasonal tasks. There's not a lot of time. So my real advice for you is just identify, if you had a goal, where would you want to be in 3 years? Like if you were to like, what's the ideal look like? And then just break it down and try to do like little baby steps, like simply having a club. If you don't have a club, that's a huge advantage. Or like having monthly meetings. That's a great step to sort of get things on board. Or even doing an outreach event a year. That could be a really good step. And so if you wanted to set a first year goal, let's say you're trying to be modest about it. I would say, so to Tom's point, find a student or somehow coax them or bribe them to start a club. And then just start the biweekly meetings. And I just say host a kickoff event. If you can find pizza or find donuts or coffee or something like that, students are usually fine even with stale donuts. Just host an event, make it so that you have a club and you're doing something. And then one thing that's really not too large of an energy barrier is usually getting a guest speaker, somebody to come to give a talk. Get a speaker or two to come in the fall and just have them give a talk, and then kind of go out to lunch afterwards and invite the students. That way, that's actually pretty close to a full functioning club right there, because you have meetings and you have some special events going on. That would be my advice if you were to start a club and you've not done one before. And so I often get the question of, well, we have 2 students that want to do physics club and we have 1 that wants to do astronomy club. And so my advice is that you can use the club, you can have multiple clubs that are all under the same umbrella, right? So if you have 2 that are into physics, they can be doing physics stuff. And if their 1 student wants to do astronomy stuff, they can all work on both of the stuff together. And you can have 2 clubs that are still under the same umbrella of SPS, right? So it doesn't have to be only 1 club doing one thing. Whatever the students want to do, that is what I suggest you do. And these are some names of some student clubs that I've taken from chapter reports, right? We have medical physics club, optics club, women in physics club, astronomy club, biophysics club, like whatever it is they want, that's what you should do. And so I did want to show you a couple facts about what student clubs look like nationally. So when we ask, here's the response from 281 of them, how often do you meet? It turns out that most of them meet once or twice a week, or sorry, once a week or once every other week. So that is the most common. That's over 2/3 of groups. Does your group have a dedicated space to meet? So it looks like 80% have their own room, but when you dig into this and you ask them, so like a lot of the time there'll be like a lab room, and the lab room is just never in use from like noon to 2 throughout the week or something like that. And the physics, the people in the major or in the degree know that they can go into that room and work on homework together from noon to 2 throughout the week. So when they see dedicated student space, it could mean a couple of different things. But it's a space that they're comfortable to go and they can come in and pop in and out of it as they want to. I'm also big on like letting them self-identify. And so I pulled some logos. We actually encourage student groups to make their own logos. You should make your own logo. Have fun with it. And you can take the SPS logo, you can download the vector art from the SPS website, You can do whatever you want. Here, this is, I think, a school in San Diego, but it's a spherical cow that's surfing, just for example. This is obviously high energy particle something or other. I'm a condensed matter physicist, so I wave my hands and say particles. And it could be something simple as just putting like your logo in the middle of the SPS logo, right? That's good enough. You can change the colors. Or you get really fancy. Berkeley's has a super fancy one, which I think is really awesome. I got the t-shirt. I love it. But my advice is just to consistency is the key and let them self-govern themselves. And some years are going to be more active, some are less, and that's okay. You'll get a link to a resource that's called the handbook. We have a laundry list of how you can structure a year. This is for like a giant super active club, but it just goes through all the different things that you could do and about what time of year you could do them, like planning for big outreach events, collecting dues, having a fundraiser, doing bad physics movie night, doing a tour of a physics laboratory or an industrial site. And then when you get sort of the end of the year, it could be like, congratulations, all these people that are graduating, or doing a road trip, or going to go visit a local four-year college. And then at the end of the year, I suggest you kind of keep it light and fun, but also congratulate the people that are graduating. That's always a nice one. So an award ceremony in the spring is usually the best idea. And so you can get this in our handbook. The new one comes out like next week, so it'll be a different cover, but this page will take you there. And it's like 80 pages and everything you could ever want to know about all of the resources, the free money, the outreach demos, all of that stuff you can get from SPS for free. So QR code will take you there, or you search SPS handbook, it'll take you there as well. By the way, you'll notice a lot of pictures of pumpkins. It turns out that for whatever reason, physics students love to blow up pumpkins or do things to pumpkins. There's like carving competitions and like chucking them and blowing them up. So I think the next cover, I think every cover since I've been director's had a pumpkin on the front. So I did want to show you a couple case studies. So this is a case study of a group. They went to our meeting. We had the Physics and Astronomy Congress, and they got to meet Renee Horton, and it changed their life. They are so excited. They still keep in touch with her. She's a NASA engineer. And so they wrote a proposal and they delivered it to the student government and to the department on how they could fundraise to go there. And it was accepted, and they got money to go, and they planned the whole trip themselves. And this is the 2-year group that did that. And after this is quotes from their chapter report, but after navigating some regulatory difficulties with our institution, and I laughed heartily, we were able to take the whole fall officer board as well as 3 new members. So basically the entire club went. Another case study is one where these are just some things that they've done. They provided science demos for campus-wide celebration as part of a family weekend. They did a Winter Wonderland event in December with a different undergraduate organization. They had a guest speaker come. They had their local SPS representative, the one that was regionally elected. They had them come visit, and they took them out to lunch. They funded tickets and food for students to watch Ant-Man Quantumania, and they did it at the Alamo Draft House. They participated in a quantum day, and then they had a meeting with the new and old officers, so there was transfer of information, and that's their picture. And then a different case study is they went to a meeting at a local 4-year institution. They attended a national meeting of SPS. They did liquid nitrogen ice cream. They did demo shows, campus tours, student government. They planned a meeting with Astronomy Club. They fundraised. They have biweekly meetings. They posted the code of conduct in all the rooms so that the students felt safe, and if there was a problem, they could help sort of mitigate that. And then this is a quote from a different chapter, but we mostly just wanted to get the word out about our existence. So being a part of the various student organizations was fairly helpful. On-campus events were better attended than off-campus, particularly since we couldn't find a van driver, so people had to find their own transportation. It was really funny, so I left it in there, but he says, Meredith is now a certified van driver who can help drive people to off-campus events. Like, that's fitting into like the whole logistical problem, right? Like they're problem solving. This is great skills, right? And then providing plenty of food and good company during a more flexible time period so people can drop in seemed best for maximizing engagement with the student body. And here you can see one of them is pieing somebody else. I don't think that's what they meant by food, but maybe, I don't know. And then I don't want to go too much into it, but they did weekly dinners. The advisors were available at the dinners. They met once a month. They had a pumpkin painting thing. They did a study-a-thon. They did Cupid darts. They worked community outreach. They did a day camp for people, which I thought was fun. They worked the Girl Scouts. They dressed as frogs and a space person, apparently. I don't know exactly the history behind this photo, but I think it's pretty cool. And then they did 3 talks a semester. So they go in and they talk about all the talks that they had, and then they also went to a local school and they brought the Van de Graaff generator and they were super excited about it. And then I did want to provide sort of, I guess, a friend who's a 2-year college advisor, and they were picking up from somebody after a 2-year gap. So there was an advisor there was a couple-year gap, and there was a new person. And so they talked about sort of the pros. They said there was an existing robust research legacy. Like there was a research project that had been going on for like 8 years. So it was like a muon detector thing, and each student group improved on the design and iteration, which I thought was awesome. It was a huge recruitment tool for getting people to come to the college to join. They said some of the negatives were that there was a lot of student turnover, which is going to happen, and members weren't active for that long. But that's kind of to be expected. We work with what we have, and atrophied campus community engagement. So thank you, Chris, for that one. And then they also had to transition with different advisory models. So one of the things that you'll note is that it's very hard to get students to get used to how you help them. And my advice there is tradition and make it very obvious what's going to happen throughout the year. So just be consistent, try several different ways of reaching out to students, include food. And if you can join or see what other groups are doing, that can be really helpful for them because they can see what it is that they can do. Also, I thought that they made this flyer on the right. Like they made that, the students. Like that's way better than what I could do. So I thought it was pretty cool. And then just as a couple of resources from SPS, so once you're a chapter in SPS, you're always a chapter. So there's no dues once you're a chapter. But if you want students to apply for awards and grants and scholarships, they need to be official SPS members. It's like $24 a person, but we have a special rate for 2-year colleges. For $200, you can invite up to 200 students. So literally everybody in your intro sequences, just up to 200 people, it's $1 a student. And they all can then apply for scholarships, grants, and awards. They'll all get our monthly publications of Observer and the Journal of Undergraduate Research in Physics and Astronomy. They all get free joint membership in the National Society of Black Physicists and the National Society of Hispanic Physicists if they want it. And they also get to access a bunch of other resources that we have. But they don't have to be individual members. Once you form a group, you're always a group, and we continue to send you stuff. And then we do have publications that the students, these are all free online. We update them the same time they go out in the mail. And we mail physical copies to your group, so you have them to like lay around the area. But the Observers for undergrads, we explore career options and professional development, and we give club advice. And if students want to write, they can get published in a national publication that goes out to 8,000 people. And then we also have a different publication, Radiations. It's more for those people that they're part of the Honor Society, but it really is a great way to connect with professionals and to read all about awesome physics and astronomy news. That's also freely available, and we send that to clubs as well. By the way, the photo in the bottom right is we encourage people to do crazy things. So this guy made thermite. He's a professional demo guy, and he let it melt through the engine of a car, and we videotaped it, and that was our outreach demo during COVID. So the students loved that one. And that's a picture of him on the car as the thermite is going through it, holding the university flag. We also have an internship program, and this is an internship program that I highly encourage your students to apply for. It is not so much based on GPA, but on the matching between the student and the projects. The projects span a full range from outreach to science policy to research at NIST to space and telescope or space telescope. And then also we have science writing and industry positions. We pay for them to come to DC. We give them a stipend of almost $7,000. They all live together at George Washington University on campus. It's a really nice opportunity. And I think we've had most years we've had at least one student that was from a 2-year college. So this is definitely something your students should apply for. And we do match the student to the research or the project to the mentor. So we make sure that we do everything we can to make sure they're gonna have a good time. And that website here will take you to that, or you can search SPS internship. Applications for this are due January 15. Another resource which is really helpful is often for career objectives. Do you have a question, Chris? Okay. Another good resource is where do people get jobs? And we keep track of this. So when people graduate, we ask them, hey, what are you doing about a year out? So they tell us where they're working. So if you go to this QR code or to this website, aapa.org/statistics, there's a resource where students can click on the state within the US, and it will pull up a list of all of the places that have hired undergrad physics majors in the past couple of years. And this is really helpful because then you can see all the awesome places that students can get jobs locally in your region. This is the list for New York, and it's like really long. So it only goes through like A through N. Another resource is we have a bunch of like careers resources. An example is the job titles people will get. And so these are the common job titles for people that graduate with undergraduate degrees. And you can see that they're not listed as physicists a lot, and that's okay. This is another thing that the kind of the resources they can get through SPS is information like this. And then a great resource for you that you can actually work with the club is there's something called the SPS Career Toolbox. It was originally designed by Tony Sansi and through an NSF grant, and we've updated it. It's going through another update right now. You can download it for free. It's an 80-page workbook, and it's sort of it's really designed to be sort of like 1-credit class on everything students need, from I've never thought about graduating to how to negotiate a salary and find a job for them, and all of the steps in between. So you can download the free copies all day. If you'd like the physical books because you want to hand books out, we sell them at cost. I think they're like $5. But this is a great resource if you're looking for some easy professional development with the student club. I think about 40 or 50% of undergraduate clubs use the Career Toolbox as an activity that they do for professional development. And it's designed to be handed to them and they can just use it. And then there's some instructor notes that you can kind of backfill with some extra information. And then if you go to our website, there's a whole set of information available on how you start a chapter, how you connect with other people, ideas for fundraising. We have a video that we did about 2 or 3 years ago on SPS at 2-year colleges, where we give a different set of information about how you'd go about working with students at 2-year colleges. And then if you're looking for guides on best practices, we have an inclusivity guide, how to create a safe space for all students, tried and true best practices for chapters, the 7 roles of SPS in your department and college, stuff like that. And that's located here on the front page of our website. And then there's even more guides for you as an advisor, like how do you be an advisor? What are best practices? What are officers supposed to do? FAQs, that kind of thing. And then real quick, and then I'm going to end up, is awards. So SPS gives out scholarships, grants, and awards twice a year. Any student that's an SPS member can apply. They just have to be an undergraduate student. We have awards in the fall for like outreach and research. So if they want to do an outreach project, they can get $600. If they want to do an outreach project to K through 12, that's a different award. That's $600. If they want to do a chapter project, we fund many of those every year. That's $2,500. If they want to, so those are the 3 that I'd highlight here. And then additionally, in the spring, we have a ton of awards, like a lot. It's too many for a slide. But we do also award, if any of your students do research, they can apply for this, and it gives them money to go present their research, and it gives money for the member and for the chapter. And then we also have an award for advisors, because you all do a lot of work. And that's our highest award, and it's $6,000. So it's a pretty nice chunk of change. And that the students you can tell your students to submit your name, and it goes into a pool for consideration. The most the one that happens the most is travel awards. And we have 3 different kinds of travel awards that you can apply for. Well, the students can apply for. One is if they want to go present at a national or regional lab or at a conference, $300. They just have to present either a poster or an oral talk. We can't pay for them to go the full way, but $300 is definitely a good start. If they would like to go and just to observe and then to write an article for us to publish, we'll give $300 as well. If they would like to go to a national or regional lab or an observatory, they can also get $300 to go do research. They just have to write about the research, a little bit of blurb about the research that they did. And then we have lots of scholarships, and these are all due in the spring, due at March 15. And we have 3 specific ones for students that are at or formerly from 2-year colleges and universities. One is the Peggy Dixon, who's very involved in AAPT. It's a $2,500 scholarship, and it's intended for people who are transitioning from a 2-year college to a 4-year institution for a physics, astronomy, engineering degree. Then we have the Mary Beth Monroe Scholarship, who was also a very active AAPT member. And that's designed for members who began studies at a 2-year college, and they can still be at a 2-year college. So if your students need a little hand, I have a very hard time getting students to apply for these scholarships. I will leave it at that. So please, please, if you could do me one favor, please get a student to submit for one of those 2 awards. Another one, our 3rd award is there's the Future Teacher Scholarship. So this is a $2,500 scholarship for people who intend to pursue teaching, and they must the members must be enrolled or plan to enroll in a teacher education program. And there's a preference for people who have attended in part or for an associate's degree a 2-year college. So these 3 awards are specifically for you, and if you have students, we want them to apply for it. And I'll end with, we're doing a big meeting 2025 in Denver. I know that's really far for most of you, but we only do it every 3 years. We're expecting 300 universities and colleges to come. We're planning to give out $100,000 in travel support to you all in the form of hotel rooms. So if you can promise me that you'll bring 3 students, I will give you a hotel room for free for the duration of the meeting. That's that, and we'll turn that on in about a year. But it's called the Physics and Astronomy Congress. The theme is supporting physics spectrums, and it's going to be, students are presenting posters. We're going to have 5 awesome plenary speakers. There's going to be visits to local observatories and research centers. It's going to be the biggest event for undergrad physics and astronomy. Probably it's the next biggest event. So if you're interested, reach out to me and I will make sure you get to the website and that you get the information you need to succeed. So I'm going to open it up to questions.
Hey, Brett, before you start answering questions, I would like for people to at the end of this workshop that they fill out the evaluation form. So I wanted to quickly show you how one could do that. So there is a URL code that you should see, a QR code, excuse me, that you should see on your screen at this time that you could click and fill this out when we're through with the workshop. And one other thing is our future workshops that we're doing coming up in September. These are the 3. So if you get a chance to attend and sign up and attend these workshops, I think that'd be beneficial for you. So back to you.
Thank you. So any questions at all? Go ahead.
I have a question about the 200 memberships for $200.
Yes.
Do those memberships have to be given away in the same year, in the same semester, or can my program buy them and distribute them throughout several years?
So it's the first one. So the way it would work is, let's say September 1, we say, let's do this. And so then you send me a list. And then at any point for the next 365 days, you can update the list. So you can update it in September, and then in November, and then in January, and we just keep adding the students to your list. But we will need you to re-up again 1 year later. So up to 200 students for a year.
Okay, and what is the discount for if we don't have 200 students? There's also a discount for 2-year college students.
Yeah, so we're willing to work with you on that. So in general, if you have a couple of students, it ends up reducing it to like $18 a person or $15 a person. I have to check the math. If that's too much of a burden, you can reach out to us and we want to work with you. Because all the money that we get actually ends up going back out through scholarships and support. So it's not about the money, it's about just sort of getting some skin in the game and getting students in the system and feel like they have a connection.
Yeah.
So I want to work with you, whatever it takes. I want a student group. I want your students to get the resources.
Thank you.
You can ask me anything. I guess we're recording, so not anything, but like anything that can be recorded, I guess. So I did just want to say I do appreciate you all coming today. And if you would like to have a one-on-one conversation, I mean, often it's sort of like good background information, just know that it's available. If you're interested in starting a chapter, it's really easy. It's literally a form saying, I will work with students. I have a student that wants to work on this club with me. And then that's more or less that's a simplified version of the form. It's really not that hard. And then once you're a chapter, you're always a chapter. So you'll get information every fall. You get a big packet of stuff to put up on the wall and announcements and all that. And more importantly, we know who to contact and we know that you're there. So then we can like nudge you. And often we have like lots of free stuff to give away. So we'll be like, hey, do you want like this free outreach kit? And you'll be like, oh yes, I think I will take the free outreach kit. It's sort of stuff like that.
Brad, how many 2-year college chapters are there about now?
Yeah, so there are some recorded, so we're going to quote me, but I'm going to tell you it might be wrong. So I think there are 45 international chapters, and I think there are 68 2-year college chapters. And we do not have one in every state, but we do have one in, I think, 36 states or something like that. The one thing I guess the one thing that I'd want to like say, just so it's very clear, is when you look at the ones that are really successful, it's like the advisor has to step in more than a normal club and just sort of define what it's going to be. Like, we're meeting every Thursday at 6 o'clock, and I'll bring pizza on the first one, and I'll bring donuts, and let's be very simple about it. And then my advice to you is pick one thing that you want to do, like a research project, or you do an outreach event a semester, or you go to a local industry and you get a cool tour. Like, just pick a thing. And then the last thing is do something that makes your life better, which is let them handle the like recruitment booth. Do you know what I mean? Like the open house thing, or if there's prospective students, let them do that. Or another one, which is shockingly helpful, is have the students run like tutoring sessions at a certain time every week. That really helps to build that glue that keeps everybody together. But those would be the 3 things that I'd say you could focus on. So
If this group is the physics club, does tutoring make sense for physics club?
yeah. So 100. So one school, what they do, literally their fundraiser is they so the physics club hosts free tutoring Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 8. And then when there's an exam coming up in Physics 1 or Physics 2, what they do is they talk to the advisor or the professor, and they're like, could we get a practice test? And they get a practice test. And then the students, any student that wants to from those classes, can come to the room, and the physics students are helping with they'll help students work with the practice test, and they ask for a suggested donation of $10. And they make way more money than I ever did as a fundraiser. And they paid for their entire club to go across the country to a physics congress after 2 years of fundraising.
All right.
Like, they're making like $1,000 a semester, like a lot of money. So yeah, that's an example. It doesn't have to work for you, but maybe it could.
Idea.
one year, what we did with the physics club, we had kind of a presentation for how people to apply for
Mhm.
internships,
Mhm.
whether RCUs and other internships from around. That was very well attended, very well attended event.
We
Then
actually
some of those,
go ahead. Is very well attended.
yes, we did tell them that there will be pizza. Come get informed. You don't have to apply right away. So the room was full, and then out of those, I don't know, maybe 50 students, maybe 10 ended up applying for RCUs, and 5 got RCUs.
That's awesome.
Good.
Look out in the fall. We do a I'll share a link in the chat with a video that we did in the January for REUs, like a how you apply. But we redo that every year. And it's got a bunch of links to some REUs that maybe you haven't heard of, but it's something we do every year. And some chapters do a watch party, so like watch the video, and then they'll sort of do Q&A afterwards. So I'll get that for you real quick. Okay.
I was amazed at the international outreach of SPS. I didn't know it had tendrils that far around the world. That's impressive.
Yeah, actually, we had our first international chapter was in 1931 in the Philippines. We actually have like 3 or 4 there. We're very strong in obviously like Canada and Mexico, but India, China, we have 2 in Egypt or 3 in Egypt, and we just got one in Iraq this year. It's a different ecosystem internationally. And even in South America, sort of a different ecosystem for undergraduate. But for example, every university in Puerto Rico has an SPS club, and they're super active.
Do they attend the congresses as well?
Yeah, so we try really hard to just to spread the opportunity, and I'd much rather have like 1 student from every club than all the students from like 6 clubs. I think we had 2 of the 3 come at the physics congress. But like I said, for the big meeting, you'll see some announcements about it. But the basic deal goes, if you're able to bring 3 students, then we will give you a hotel room for 4 nights at the venue, which is like $1,000. So basically, that we can't again pay for everybody to go, but that's one thing. And then we also have a separate program if any of your institutions are minority serving institutions or HBCUs, then we have a separate pot of money that pays for the whole ride for those students to come. And if you're under extreme financial hardship and you need a little extra help, we have been known to do, we can help, we can talk about it.
So I grew up in Canada and I hadn't heard of SPS, but the undergraduate physics in Canada, at least at the time, had an annual conference, national conference, the Canadian Undergraduate Physics Conference, and that's entirely student run. So that was really cool that you would put together your application materials, make a proposal, go to the conference, make your pitch, and then that year's host gets to decide who hosts the following year.
No, they have a really cool system. We actually just did a tour of the schools, sort of like from like Niagara Falls, Toronto, over through Nova Scotia. So I hope they join, and I have free money for them if they want to join. So that's I would say that's my currency. But that's a little too on the nose, I guess. Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. And like in Mexico, there's a totally different system, right? So we don't want to change anything. It's just however the student clubs are, we want to help. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I thank you all for listening to me for so long. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad,
very much, Brad.
and everyone else. That was helpful for me.
And then if you need anything, I'm going to put the generic, here's our generic inbox. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, conundrums, you want more information, you need help, just send me a link, and like we want to help. So just let us know what we can do to help. So
It's time to